UFC 304 is this week. I'm going to give you a full card prediction breakdown of all 14 fights on this card. This card's actually very good, so I'm really looking forward to it after the last couple of weeks, especially last week. Last week kind of just killed any, I don't even know what to say. Like, I didn't even want to watch the UFC. I didn't want anything to do with the UFC for like almost an entire week. Last week, it was absolutely brutal, but this week, looking very nice. So first fight on the card, we have Shauna Bannon versus Elliott. Ardelean is how I think you say her name. She was supposed to be on the Contender Series. I believe I saw some posts. I think I follow like a prospect watch on Instagram, and they showed her as being on the Contender Series, and I guess she has a very big following. She does OnlyFans, I believe, has some really weird posts on her Instagram, but outside of that, from what I saw on her tape, she's got finishing potential. I know she hasn't fought the best of competition. I know she's fought, Weili Zhang and Diana Belbita before. She lost to both of them, but recently she's gone on a little bit of a run, but against very low-level competition. But what I will say is she does have, I think in my opinion, as in her fight style, she has more finishing potential than Shauna Bannon. Shauna Bannon has been going to a lot of decisions in her career. Last time she got a finish was, 2 years ago? And in her last fight against Bruno Brazil, she got, taken down, I believe, a couple times. And Bruno Brazil is not really that big of a grappler or anything like that. And Bruno Brazil really just controlled the range the entire fight. And I think Elliott Ardelean, who's a little sloppier, I will say, on the feet. I think Shauna Bannon's a little bit nicer technically, I guess. I think she's a little bit too patient at times. There's not too much pop in her shots. I think Elliott Ardelean, I think she'll at least have a little bit of pop in her shots and does have the finishing potential on the ground as well. So I think I'm going to go with her in this fight. It is low-level women's MMA, so I really don't mind taking a risky underdog here. I think a lot of people are going with Shauna Bannon, which I don't mind because she is a pretty safe fighter. I believe she was a champ in Invicta, I want to say. Well, I might be wrong there. She has some kind of accolades as well, amateur-wise, but from her last fight, I didn't really like too much of what I saw. It seemed very low level in my opinion. I just think Ardelean has a little bit more finishing potential, even though it was against lower level competition. So I'm going to take a pretty risky underdog there, but let's move on. We have Mick Parkin versus Łukasz Brzeski. I didn't mind Brzeski when he came into the UFC, but I guess he got a win recently against Walter Walker. But before then, I think he got robbed against Martin Buday. And then he's just been on a little bit of a loss streak, got KO'd by Waldo Cortez Acosta. Hasn't looked too great, but I think he will kind of take out like the bottom level of heavyweights. But Mick Parkin has been on quite a bit of a decent run, starting from the Contender Series against Eduardo Neves, got a finish there. Beat Jamal Pogues, who's decent on the feet, I will say. Kyle Machado, who's all right. I don't think too much of him, but Mo Usman gave him his first loss in the UFC, which was, I think I picked Mo Usman in that fight. And I think Mick Parkin can grapple, can wrestle. I think he's actually pretty decent on the feet as well. Can mix it in, kind of keep Brzeski guessing on the feet, and I think the takedowns will kind of slow him down in this fight. So I'm going to go with Mick Parkin here. I think he has a total game plan here. I think it goes to a decision. However, I think he just mixes in the takedowns. More of a well-balanced guy, in my opinion. So let's move on. We have Sam Patterson versus Kiefer Crosbie. I think it will go with Sam Patterson here. Sam Patterson, after moving up to welterweight, does look a little bit better. It looks like he can take a shot better from the one shot that we saw landed pretty clean on him. And Johan Lainez does have some decent power in his hands. Ended up submitting Johan Lainez as well. I think Sam Patterson, who he does have his problems in exchanges where his chin is pretty much wide open and very hittable at times. So it is a little bit of a worry when he starts to move up against some of the more powerful guys in this welterweight division that does have a lot of prospects. It is going to be very worrying. But Kiefer Crosbie, I think he will be able to beat him here. Kevin Jousset, although he did make it a little bit competitive early on, Jousset was able to take him down and get the submission. I think Sam Patterson can do the same here, eventually get the submission. Maybe he'll tag up Crosbie a little bit more on the feet and then eventually get to the submission. But I see a late round. I think second round submission is what I see for Sam Patterson here. I think his skill levels up a division really kind of helps here. I don't know how bad his weight cut was at lightweight, but it looks a little bit better now as well. So I'm going to go with Sam Patterson. A little too open in exchanges. Does have an 8-inch reach advantage, so maybe he'll play with them on the feet a little bit more before potentially putting the grappling to the test. But I'm going to go with Sam Patterson here by submission. Up the card, we have Mokaev versus Manel Kape on the early prelims, which is absolutely crazy. I think I have like a little suspicion that maybe the UFC knows about a potential pullout from either one of these guys, or they're kind of afraid of Kape maybe missing weight. So that's why they moved it to the early prelims is my guess. But I'm going to go with Manel Kape here. Mokaev, I've always been kind of suspect of his fighting abilities. I think maybe some people put too much hate on him. You have seen him kind of progress a little bit more, and it has gotten better, but he's still pretty young. He's, 24 years of age as of in a week, or at least I guess he's turning 24 this week, if this is actually updated correctly, but he's still very young, has been improving quite a bit, but his stand-up game is really lacking at this point, and his takedowns have looked a little bit better. His chain wrestling abilities and the ability to turn them into decent grappling positions on the ground has been improving since he first got into the UFC. However, his striking is just falling way behind. Alex Perez arguably could have won that fight. I had Mokaev, but it was a pretty close fight, and Mokaev honestly didn't look too impressive in that one. It was more about Alex Perez not really closing the gap towards the end of that fight and winning it. So it was a little bit worrying to see Mokaev kind of struggle a little bit more there, but Perez has looked pretty decent recently. I'm going to go with Manel Kape. He's got some good power in his hands. He's going to be a lot better than Mokaev on the feet. He has good takedown defense, very strong. I think he can defend the takedowns of Mokaev. He's 30 years of age as well, so he's in his prime. I'm going with Manel Kape. I think he's better than Mokaev, again, on the feet. Just every aspect. I just don't think Mokaev is going to be able to take him down, or at least control him on the ground, which is my worry. Like, we've seen Mokaev struggle to keep some of these higher level opponents. I guess Tim Elliott was decently competitive. Like, Alex Perez was very competitive. It's just a little bit of a worry for me. I'm going to go Manel Kape. I don't think he's going to finish Mokaev. Maybe towards the end of this fight, Mokaev just gets beaten up a little bit too much and goes on like a single, and Manel Kape just kind of flips position, just punches them up a little bit more. I don't really see that being the case. I think this goes to a decision, probably maybe 29-28. This is in a UK. Maybe Mokaev will get a little bit of a favorable decision here, but I'm going to go Manel Kape. I think he lands way better on the feet, does way more damage as well, and I don't think the grappling is going to be working too well for Mokaev in this fight. So Manel Kape by decision, probably 29-28. Let's move on. We have Oban Elliott versus Preston Parsons. Oban Elliott is a very good grappler, and against Val Woodburn, which I think I did pick Val Woodburn in that fight. I was thinking Val Woodburn could probably defend some of the takedowns, but he was kind of just pushing himself into like the takedown attempts of Oban Elliott, and he was actually cracking Oban Elliott quite a bit in that fight and had some pretty good finishing ability in that first round where he probably could have finished him, but he kind of just got too overzealous and went forward, and he was able to get double legs pretty easily. So Elliott has some really good grappling, maybe better grappling than Parsons, but Parsons does have some really good takedown ability. And Matthew Semelsberg, I think, got him down once, but he got him down like 7 times. I looked at the stat page. So Preston Parsons can wrestle. I think he's going to be a lot better than Oban Elliott on the feet. We haven't seen too much, or at least not that we haven't seen too much, but against his last fight for Val Woodburn, who I think fought at middleweight his last fight and didn't look too great there. Like, it looks like a middleweight fighting when he was fighting Oban Elliott. So Val Woodburn is powerful, but he doesn't have some crazy striking ability, in my opinion, or at least technique-wise. I think Preston Parsons is a little bit more well-balanced than Oban Elliott in this fight. So I'm going to go Preston Parsons here. Maybe TKO halfway through this fight, but I think safer pick is probably more like a decision. You just never really know Preston Parsons. He doesn't really have a crazy finishing ability. Like, his wins over Evan Elder is actually aging pretty well. Matthew Semelsberger, a pretty solid win to have as well. Lost to Trevin Joslice's decision. I think he even rocked Daniel Rodriguez at a certain point in that fight. I remember looking at that one pretty closely when D-Rod actually came back. So has looked pretty decent in all of his fights. Again, nicely aged win over Evan Elder. I'm going to have to go with Preston Parsons here. I think he's a little bit more well-rounded than an Oban Elliott. So let's move on. We have Modestas Bukauskas versus Marcin Prachnio. I was playing with the idea to go with Modestas Bukauskas, but after his last fight against Vitor Petrino, who I think is a pretty solid prospect, I know he just lost to Anthony Smith, God forbid, but Bukauskas kind of got caught with like a winging, I think it was a left hook, right? is a check hook. He got caught coming in forward way too much, and what you see from Marcin Prachnio is leg kicks, and then he'll just throw some wild stuff, very explosive, wing overhands. And I can see maybe Bukauskas kind of getting caught up with the straight shots and not really checking the footwork as much, and Prachnio kind of cutting off the cage a little bit more, and Prachnio being able to land pretty well on Bukauskas. And this could go the other way. I think this is actually a relatively closer fight. A lot of people are taking Modestas Bukauskas, which I do not mind at all, because I think this is going to start off more as like a leg kicking battle. And Bukauskas is a very technical guy. I think he's actually relatively underrated too. But his wins over Tyson Pedro and Zach Palga haven't really aged too well. He was in the UFC on his first stint, and then he got absolutely destroyed by Khalil Roundtree, where his knee just got blown up in that fight and kind of got screwed and got kicked out of the UFC. Went on a nice little run in Cage Warriors and then came back. But I'm going to end up going with Marcin Prachnio. I think he's going to be able to land on Modestas Bukauskas, just getting way too caught up in the fight, just not really keeping up with the footwork, and Marcin Prachnio is just walking down a little bit more here. I don't mind a Bukauskas pick at all. I think this fight's actually going to be really close. I'm going to go 29-28 Prachnio. I don't think he KOs Bukauskas. I know he came off a relatively brutal KO. He got kind of flatline and up like immediately. It looked kind of similar to what am I thinking here? It was Dustin Jacoby versus I'm going to really annoy myself with this one. It was over in London. I was actually kind of angry because he got flatline, just got up and just started walking again. I can't remember the fight. I'll remember after this, but Dao Eun-young, I want to say. Yeah, weird fight like that. Got flatlined, immediately got up. But it was a little bit more clear than that other one with the Dustin Jacoby. But I'm going Prachnio, 29-28 decision. I think he's just going to be able to walk down Bukauskas a little bit and land the bigger shots on him. So let's move on. We have Caolán Loughran versus Jake Hadley. Oh boy, had the mighty have fallen. Jake Hadley actually looked like a pretty good prospect, and I think he can still make a little bit of a run. I just worry that he's already kind of like smaller for flyweight. This is a short notice fight at bantamweight, and who knows, maybe he just looks incredible, but Caolán Loughran, I believe, was already having a training camp for this fight, so it's already a worry based on that. And then you had their fighting styles. This is at bantamweight, and Caolán Loughran's already like a decently stocky dude. Like, I call Caolán Loughran more like a little Vettori, where he's pretty much good everywhere. I think he has a pretty decent chin as well, but he's not like elite anywhere in my opinion. I think he has good wrestling abilities, but what he's able to do after that is kind of iffy at this point. He's 28, so he still has time to improve, and Jake Hadley's more kind of turning into a little Till at this point. So just disappointing in his last couple of fights against Charles Johnson and Cody Durden. I'm gonna have to go Caolán Loughran. I think he mixed in the takedowns, has a full training camp as well. Jake Hadley already being small, relatively small for a flyweight, just based on the guys he's fighting at bantamweight. I don't really like that. Taking this on short notice against a grappler, I don't really like it for him. So I'm going to go Caolán Loughran by decision, just completely, I don't want to say domination, but I think it's going to be tough early on, but I think he's going to be able to take down Jake Hadley, and Jake Hadley's just going to tire out by the second and third round. Maybe he has a really nice round in the first round, hurts Loughran a little bit, and maybe steals that round and ends up being 29-28. However, I see a for sure Caolán Loughran win here. I'm relatively confident in him. Tapology 84% as well. I'm going Caolán Loughran probably by decision, maybe 29-28. Depends on what Jake Hadley looks like in the first round. But I think the pace of Loughran just going forward, the forward pressure, taking down Jake Hadley multiple times, I think we'll eventually get to him. So let's move on. We have Molly McCann versus Bruno Brazil. Bruno Brazil looked really good on our Contender Series fight against Mark Mann. Got that really nice head kick. They compared it to Leon Edwards. I think they even had like the side-by-side during the fight or after the KO or whatever of the setup, and everything. It was kind of the same but like flipped. So that was a really nice KO. Went against Denise Gomes, just showed she had no head movement and was just getting hit like crazy. Shauna Bannon, she controlled the octagon a little bit more, used her distance a little bit decently, and was able to take her down and stuff like that. But Loma Lukumi is actually a pretty good opponent, and she lost that one pretty clearly. But Molly McCann, Moving up, or no, she went down to strawweight. I lied. Yeah, she went down to strawweight after losing to Julia Stoliarenko, just putting herself in the armbar, which was pretty embarrassing because Stoliarenko, 10-7, when she fought her, not a very good opponent. It was probably likely getting cut too. I actually kind of want to check this real quick. I'm pretty sure she was on the verge of getting cut and everything like that. So let me see. Yeah, she was on a what? Lost 4 of her last 5 before winning against Molly McCann. Absolutely crazy. But Molly McCann has looked pretty decent down at strawweight, just being the bigger fighter. And I do think she's going to be able to beat Bruna Brazil. You don't really see too much of women's MMA fighter like just brutally KOing other women's fighters. And I think she does. Like Erin Blanchfield, that one kind of makes sense. The Julia Stoliarenko doesn't really. But I think she's going to be able to get on the inside of Bruna Brazil here, kind of just back her up against the fence. And I think she's going to be stronger than Bruna Brazil. Maybe she starts taking down Bruna Brazil, trying to make a statement, tries to submit her in this fight. But I think it's going to be more of an all-around fight for Molly McCann here, getting a takedown early on, kind of tiring out Brazil a little bit more, and then going into the second round looking for a nice little finish, backing up Brazil against the fence and maybe trying to get another spinning elbow or anything like that. But I can see Molly McCann getting like a late second round finish here, probably by TKO. Maybe she does get another spinning elbow, but I think she'll start to wear on Bruna Brazil in the second round, just getting on the inside, backing her up, closing off the distance. And I think she can get the finish. She looked pretty solid down at strawweight, so we'll see what she'll be able to do. She's 34 years of age, so she is getting up there in age, but we'll see what happens. Let's move on. We have Nathaniel Wood versus Daniel Pineda. I'm going to go with Nathaniel Wood. Daniel Pineda hasn't looked that great recently, and 39 years of age as well, so he's getting up there in age. Nathaniel Wood, I think, is actually pretty good, 31. Lost his last fight against Muhammad Naimov, where I think he did send in like an appeal or whatever, because Naimov did cheat a couple of times, and the ref didn't even take a point or anything like that. So it was a pretty rough fight to watch, and he kind of got screwed in that one. But his last fight against, or before then, against Andre Fili, I thought he looked really good. Some people thought Fili won, but I mean, I thought Nathaniel Wood actually looked pretty great in that fight. So looked really good on the feet. I think he even mixed in some of the groundwork as well. Daniel Pineda lost to Alex Caceres, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but Tucker Lutz wins that one by guillotine, no contest with Andre Fili, loses to Cub Swanson 4 years ago, and he's not really that active either, which is kind of a worry. Last fight was a year ago. I just like the activity of Nathaniel Wood fighting, 9 months ago? Well, I guess that was a pretty long time ago. That was in the, Abu Dhabi card or something like that. He has been more active than Pineda within like a 3-year span. So I'm going to go with Nathaniel Wood, kind of just chopping up the legs of Daniel Pineda. I don't think he'll engage with the grappling that much, so it's not really too much of a worry for me. I think Nathaniel Wood has some decent pop in his shots as well, so I think he's going to be hurting Daniel Pineda all over the place. I'm worried about his finishing ability after he dropped someone, like he saw that against a Philly a little bit more. I think he dropped him after getting hurt early on in that first round and wasn't able to finish him up on the ground. You do kind of worry about that in his fights. I think he's just going to be able to beat up Daniel Pineda pretty badly, chop up the legs, hurt him, but I don't think he's going to get the finish. I'll say 30-27 win for Nathaniel Wood here. I don't think he gets the KO, but we'll see what happens here. But I think Nathaniel Wood for sure wins this fight. Minus 500 favorite, I think, is probably justified. So let's move on to the main card. To the main card, we have Arnold Allen versus Giga Chikadze. I think I am going to end up going with Arnold Allen. I think the forward pressure will probably be a little bit too much for Giga Chikadze. The explosiveness, I mean, just the movement as well. This is going to be a very high-paced fight. And in his last fight, Giga Chikadze, you saw it get slowed down a little bit more. And Arnold Allen also has the ability to grapple, which I think will definitely help him here. Just being a little bit more well-balanced in this fight, mixing in the takedowns along with his striking and explosiveness, kind of just turning up the pressure a little bit more, getting Giga Chikadze to kind of think quite a bit in this fight and get overwhelmed by Arnold Allen, and then eventually input the grappling a little bit more here. So I'm going to go Arnold Allen. I don't think he KOs Giga Chikadze or anything like that, but I think he puts in a pretty good game plan against Giga Chikadze, looks really well balanced, mixes everything in, and is able to win this fight by decision. Maybe Giga Chikadze is going to be able to land a couple good punches early on with Arnold Allen kind of rushing forward and Giga Chikadze kind of throwing some stuff down the middle to kind of stop him a little bit more and knock his head back a little bit, but I'm going to go with Arnold Allen Again, just mixing everything in. I think he'll eventually be able to overwhelm Giga Chikadze and establish himself on the ground at certain moments in this fight and on the feet as well. So let's move on. Arnold Allen, 29-28 decision, maybe even a 30-27. Let's move on. Christian Leroy Duncan versus Gregory Rodriguez. I guess we're kind of going to be able to find out how good of a prospect Christian Leroy Duncan is. It feels like with every middleweight prospect, they kind of have like that fraud check moment, weirdly enough, like only with middleweights and maybe a little bit with light heavyweights as well, where you see like this really nice prospect and then just like someone like Jack Hermanson or even Roman Dolidze for Nasruddin Imavov, which is really weird. Because I don't even think Roman Dolidze is actually that good, but like it just seems really weird how these guys just get checked by some of this like lower level competition. But Gregory Rodriguez is actually pretty good. His last loss was against Bruno Ferreira, and he got flatlined. But since then, Dennis Tillulin KO just brutalized him in that fight. KO'd Brad Tavares which is actually pretty impressive because Tavares has a pretty solid chin. But Christian Leroy Duncan, after losing to Armin Petrosyan, kind of just doing a little bit too much. Like, he's very athletic, has a lot of weird abilities on the feet where he throws a lot of wild stuff, and he was just doing way too much. And he kind of toned it down a little bit more against Dennis Tillulin, won by KO, and then beat Claudio Ribeiro by KO as well. So this is going to be very interesting. We'll see how good of a prospect Christian Leroy Duncan is. I just think Gregory Rodriguez, who's 32, isn't too old, especially for middleweight. I think he's going to be able to use the wrestling a little bit more here. I think we'll kind of be able to see what kind of grappling ability Christian Leroy Duncan does have as well. So I'm going Gregory Rodriguez, has the power to kind of keep it a little bit even on the feet here. You do kind of worry about the range of Christian Leroy Duncan in this fight, being at 4 inches of reach advantage here. And it's a little bit more rangier with his kicks and everything like that. If Rodriguez can be able to pressure forward and land some strikes and mix in the takedowns and overwhelm Christian Leroy Duncan a little bit more here, I think he'll have a lot of success as well. I'm going to go Gregory Rodriguez. A lot of people are taking Duncan, which is very interesting. I think Gregory Rodriguez is pretty solid at middleweight. And again, you always have these moments where one of these middleweight guys gets checked. And I guess if he does beat Gregory Rodriguez even by finish, I think you'll start to see him winning some really nice fights, gaining quite a bit in the rankings, because it seems like once they get over that tough battle, they're kind of just flying up. So I'm going to go Gregory Rodriguez until I see a little bit more from Christian Leroy Duncan, or if he's able to beat Gregory Rodriguez, then it'll be different. But I think Gregory Rodriguez is just going to be able to out-grapple Christian Leroy Duncan and mix it in a little bit better. So let's move on. We have Bobby Green versus Paddy Pimblett. I think a lot of people are going to be split. 47% and 53% in this fight. I was thinking Bobby Green. I think I might have even said Bobby Green when I was previewing this fight, but I think I'm feeling Paddy Pimblett a little bit more at this point, because Bobby Green, I'll mention it for probably the rest of the time, he's taken a lot of damage. Lost to Islam Makhachev by ground and pound, which wasn't crazy damage, but it was just a lot of strikes landing, and the ref kind of just had to stop it. But Drew Dober, he got flatlined. Jared Gordon, he looked like absolute trash and was getting landed on quite a bit, and then jumped and did a running headbutt to get the accidental head clash. Tony Ferguson even, I think hurt him pretty badly. I don't remember if he dropped him, but he hurt him extremely badly. And then he eye pokes Tony Ferguson and gets a little bit of a stoppage there to recover. Grant Dawson didn't land. I don't think he even landed a punch. Bobby Green just needed to land a jab and he went out. So I don't really think too much of that fight. It ended pretty early. But Jalen Turner brutalized in that fight. Jim Miller even knocked him down very early on in that fight as well. He's taken tons of damage. And when we see Bobby Green struggle a little bit more is with a guy with Jared Gordon's stature. If you're not looking at a guy that's got crazy KO power like a Drew Dober, or even Jalen Turner, who's very difficult with his range and his speed and power, very difficult fighter to fight. Outside of just having power like maybe a Jim Miller, it's very tough for Bobby Green to kind of go forward. He's more of a counter striker. And I think Paddy Pimblett, like you saw in his last couple fights, he's been on the outside quite a bit. And I think his movement's pretty solid. I think he does a good job chopping at the legs as well. And I think he's going to frustrate Bobby Green in this fight. And we do know Paddy Pimblett has really good grappling. I think he's going to be able to, I don't know if he's going to be able to get down Bobby Green, maybe in the later half of this fight if it does end up going there. But I think he can actually land on Bobby Green pretty well if he doesn't engage in kind of that firefight where Bobby Green likes to play around a little bit more and counter strike. So as long as he doesn't get kind of stuck in like a battle with Bobby Green in Bobby Green's territory where he's able to counter strike pretty well, I think he's going to be able to do a good job at staying on the outside and kind of leg kicking Bobby Green, kind of what Jared Gordon was doing, because Bobby Green looked really sloppy, kind of just flailing his arms at Jared Gordon, and Jared Gordon was actually able to land pretty well. And Jim Miller, I don't think he's a wrestler, but he doesn't have the same grappling ability that I think Paddy Pimblett does. And I do think at a certain moment in this fight, I think a Paddy Pimblett, who's I think very opportunistic. I think we've seen that quite a bit when he hurts someone. He jumps on him, pounces on him, lands some really good punches on the ground, like you saw against even Tony Ferguson, like was landing some nice elbows, busted him open as well. Looks really good. Like even like hopping on the back or something like that. His submission ability just has really good, like a really good opportunistic trait in his fight, which I don't think many fighters do have. So I think he's going to be able to hurt Bobby Green at some point in this fight. I think he's going to chop up the legs of Bobby Green, and Bobby Green's just going to get really sloppy trying to chase Paddy Pimblett. And I think Paddy Pimblett's going to crash forward, land good on Bobby Green. Bobby Green's going to stumble back a little bit more, and we'll see Paddy Pimblett kind of jump on his back and get a rear naked choke. So I'm going to go second round submission for Paddy Pimblett. He said he's looking for the submission. From what it sounds like in his interviews, it seems like he's got a pretty decent game plan. It sounds like he's very confident in this fight, and he says he wants to show off the grappling a little bit more as well. And this is at sea level. This isn't like Las Vegas where it's like, I think top 5 in elevation, but like cardio I don't think is going to be too big of a problem for Paddy Pimblett. He has had that problem before. He even saw against Tony Ferguson. He kind of tired out a little bit more just trying to finish him, I think in like the first or second round or whatever it was. But I think he's going to be able to hang in there. I think he's going to be able to circle around, chop up the legs, frustrate Bobby Green, land really solid on Bobby Green, who's taken tons of damage in his last, maybe year, 2 years in the UFC. I think Paddy Pimblett's going to be very opportunistic, going to hurt him. I think it gets past the first round. Maybe even not. I can see this probably ending towards the later half of the first round, either early second, maybe mid-second, late first round submission from Paddy Pimblett. I just think he's going to be able to hop on the back of Bobby Green, and he has some very, very good grappling. Like you even saw against Jordan Levitt. I know it's a much lower level guy than you would say Bobby Green is, but even Jordan Levitt, Jordan Levitt's a grappler, and he was able to tie up the arm and in a very intricate way and be able to get the submission that way over a guy who's actually a pretty good grappler in Jordan Levitt. So I think Paddy Pimblett's grappling is next level. I think he's very opportunistic. I think he's going to find a way to be able to finish Bobby Green in the grappling. Bobby Green, who's also 38, 2 inches of reach on Paddy Pimblett, so he's going to be able to land on Bobby Green while circling out, I think, in this fight. So I'm going to go Paddy Pimblett. I think he's going to win by submission. Bobby Green's durability is slowly going down, and it is a little bit worrying to see. So I'm going to go Paddy Pimblett by submission, either late first round or mid-second round submission for Paddy Pimblett. If not, I think you can hang in there with in a 3-round fight with Bobby Green. Also, maybe Bobby Green getting 29-28, just winning a round. Not saying he's going to win by 29-28. I think Paddy Pimblett either way wins by decision or gets the submission finish. But maybe Bobby Green steals a round at some point. So I'm going Paddy Pimblett by submission, rear naked choke, just hops on the back with a hurt Bobby Green. So let's move on. We have the co-main event of Tom Aspinall versus Curtis Blaydes for the interim heavyweight championship. The first fight, it was a little bit worrying seeing Tom Aspinall be a little bit more frantic, but I guess he's coming in with an injury. And weirdly enough, it was kind of best case scenario because he came back after the injury looking really good and much more fit for the heavyweight division. If you remember, he's kind of skinny fat a little bit more for that heavyweight division, and now he's put on tons of muscle, leaned out, is absolutely shredded for heavyweight, and he's on the verge of the heavyweight limit at 261. So he's a much bigger dude. He's fast, really good grappling as well. I think he has the lowest fight time. It's either in the UFC or in the heavyweight division, which is incredible. But I'm not going to get into the John Jones hypothetical fight here, but I think against Curtis Blaydes, I think he's just kind of better everywhere. I think on the feet he's going to be faster. His footwork, I thought he did a good job baiting Sergey Pavlovich. I know he took a shot or two in that fight as well. Kind of took it pretty clean. He did have a pretty decent reaction to the power of Pavlovich, but was able to control that fight on the feet, kind of bait Pavlovich and on the feet and kind of hit him and knock him down and finish him up. But Curtis Blaydes, I think, hittable at times, like you saw what Pavlovich was able to do. I thought he hung in there actually pretty decent against Pavlovich, which surprised me, but Pavlovich eventually took over. And I think Tom Aspinall, who's 78 inches of reach, a 2-inch reach difference here. He's going to be faster on the feet. Hopefully this isn't a high-paced fight, kind of like their last fight was, because I do think Aspinall could get touched up by Blaydes a little bit, which would be a little bit worried, but I don't think Blaydes is going to be able to take down Aspinall. Aspinall, if anything, I would probably be able to take down Blaydes in this fight. I think down the center, Aspinall is going to have really good work here. I think he's just going to bait Blaydes in eventually in the later half of this first round with his footwork, kind of just feinting pretty well, because he does do a really good job at feinting. There's going to be a lot of leg kicks, and I think it's just going to be kind of quiet at the beginning part of this fight, and then eventually it's going to go boom right down the center. I think Aspinall is going to drop Blaydes and kind of finish him up with ground and pound TKO strikes, probably call out John Jones. We'll see what happens with that fight, but I think Tom Aspinall gets the first round finish by TKO against Curtis Blaydes, just baiting him in with a straight shot. With a very, very calmer start than their last fight was, but I think Aspinall avenges his loss. It's a finish. I'm not too worried. I mean, just in general, I think this fight is happening off of like US time, so it's going to be very late in the arena, and I don't know how these UK fighters are going to adjust to it, so maybe that becomes a factor. But adrenaline's a very real thing. I'm sure they're probably drinking like energy drinks or something. I don't know what they would be doing, but it actually sounds pretty rough. I don't know how they're going to be able to fight with it being like 4 o'clock in the morning, maybe 5 a.m. So it's going to be really tough. But I think Tom Aspinall wins this one for sure. I think he's better than Blaydes pretty much everywhere. I think kind of just eventually baits in Blaydes with a straight shot and knocks him down, finishes him up on the ground. Late first round, TKO. A lot of people are taking Aspinall as well, 92%. Let's move on. We have Leon Edwards versus Belal Muhammad 2 as the UFC welterweight championship main event for this card. I'm going to go with Leon Edwards. Was obviously winning that first fight that they had, and eventually I picked Belal, but he was hurting Belal kind of a lot in that fight, and Belal was kind of circling around as well, and Leon was on his way to finishing Belal, which is kind of crazy. I know he got that finish over Kamaru Usman, but he hasn't really gotten too many finishes as of recent. But I'll just say, if this fight, say like they just show me the finish of this fight, say it's by decision, it's going to be very boring in my opinion. I think Leon Edwards does get the finish, but I will say if it wasn't Belal heading into this fight, I do think both of them are kind of boring in different ways. Leon Edwards plays it very safe on the feet, more of like a counter striker. He hasn't really, outside of like the Kamaru Usman fight, you even saw like the Nate Diaz fight, he's kind of playing with them a little bit more, wasn't trying to go for the finish too much. Even Kamaru Usman, he played it a little bit safer, was landing those big shots and got the big reactions out of Kamaru Usman, and still kind of played it safe there as well. Colby Covington, a lot of people talked about how bad Colby Covington was, which is fair to say as well, but Leon Edwards didn't look that great in that fight either. But against Belal Muhammad couldn't even finish a one-armed Burns. Like, let's be real. It's pretty embarrassing. Everyone knew Burns had one arm because he was just swinging like overhands on the same arm the entire time, and Belal Muhammad couldn't get the finish there. And we know Belal Muhammad, I think he's kind of due to get KO'd. I'm just going to be honest. Like, the last time he was finished was against Vicente Luque in 2016, 2017, if you want to estimate a little bit more. It was in November, so 2017. So it's been a while. He got hurt very badly against Leon Edwards and was probably on his way to getting finished in that fight, but didn't get finished. So I think he's due for a finishing. I think he's going to get beat up pretty badly. I think he's going to get rocked. I just don't see where Belal Muhammad's just going to have the edge here. I guess if you're going with Belal, you're expecting him to maybe take him down and control him on the ground, but we've seen Leon Edwards to be strong in the grappling. He has good takedown defense. Even if he does get, as in takedown defense, I think he does a good job at getting back up. But when he gets taken down, we've seen him be really good in the grappling, and I think that's going to be a little bit worrying for Belal, and I just don't think he's just going to be able to take down Leon Edwards and hold him down to the ground when Leon Edwards is really good at getting up and really good in the grappling. So I don't think that's a factor for Belal, and I think even from what we saw against like even a Kamaru Usman with the knees up the middle and chopping at the legs and into the body and even setting up a head kick, what if we could see Belal Muhammad just get head kicked and get TKO'd on the ground? I wouldn't mind seeing that either, and I do think Belal Muhammad gets finished in this fight by TKO in like the second round. I will say I would say the third round, but I think that's just way too long. I'm going to be honest. I think Leon Edwards, I'm hoping, is aggressive because we haven't seen him be too aggressive at all in his recent fights. I think probably since the Nate Diaz fight, he hasn't really been aggressive. So, and even Leon Edwards towards the end, he's kind of like, a lot of it was counter, like playing with them, like kicking him over and toppling him over a little bit more with his takedowns and kind of messing with him. But we haven't seen him really be truly aggressive like he was against Belal when he hurt him and all that. So I think it's going to be a quieter fight starting out. I think Belal Muhammad is going to fail a couple takedowns and get really frustrated. I think Leon Edwards is going to see that and is like, okay, Belal isn't going to do anything here. Like, he's not really a true threat. I think he's going to open up in the second round and go for the finish. And this is at sea level as well. We saw like the big difference that Leon Edwards had against Kamaru Usman at Salt Lake City and then at sea level in London. And I don't think he's going to gas out too badly in this fight. If it does eventually get to those later rounds, hopefully, I don't think many people are going to be awake or be watching if it ends up going to the 4th or 5th round. So even in the arena, I'm sure some people would powder out if they saw it going to the 4th or 5th round because it is super late there. But I think Leon Edwards gets the finish. Belal is kind of due to get finished, and I don't think his chin's the greatest. So I can see Leon Edwards maybe setting up the head kick, or maybe Belal Muhammad just plays it a little bit too safe. Like, he finally got this moment. Maybe he plays it a little bit too safe. He's a little scared in the fight. We saw what happened in their first fight where Leon Edwards was able to land on him, and Belal Muhammad knows what Leon Edwards feels like when he does land on him. So I'm going Leon Edwards second round TKO, whether it's a knee up the middle, a head kick after he works the body and works the leg, or I don't know. I can just see a finish for Leon Edwards. I don't think Belal's much of a threat on the ground, especially. Leon Edwards isn't going to get finished by Belal unless something crazy happens. So I'm going Leon Edwards second round TKO. Let me know who you guys have down below in this main event. Let me know who you guys have on this card. I think the closer fights I will probably say are especially on the main card, Paddy Pimblett, Bobby Green. That's going to be a little even with some people. Maybe Arnold Allen, Giga Chikadze. You never really know. But outside of that, this is going to be a really fun card, so I'm really looking forward to it, especially after the last couple of weeks. Even Mokaev, Kape, people are picking Mokaev. I think that's very interesting, but we'll see how this card goes. I'm really excited for it again, and I'll see you guys next time.